What surprised you most about the CFTC?
We didn't have the swap expertise on hand for the markets that it was about to regulate. Fortunately, at that time in 2009, we had a big budget bump up. So we were able to go on a hiring spree and get the swaps expertise we needed, at least to do the Dodd Frank legislation. CFTC staff had been declining in numbers for the preceding years. We really had to build it back up. However, my feeling was, and I'd worked with the agency from my time on PSI and Capitol Hill, there was significant expertise there, obviously in the markets that the CFTC did regulate, very deep and very knowledgeable. And both, frankly, Gary asked Gensler, the chair, Gary asked me, I'm coming in and I'm going to, our mandate is to increase regulation and undo a lot of what the CFMA did. That's what Dodd Frank did, Commodity Futures Modernization Act. And this agency has spent the last 10 years implementing that deregulatory approach that Congress directed in 2000 under the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, CFMA. And I'm going to now undo a lot of that, and we're going to regulate. Will the staff support me, or are they going to fight me? And I said, Gary, the staff is a professional staff. If the chair of the agency directs you to go in one direction, they'll go in that direction. These people aren't political people, they're professional people, and they follow the direction of the commission. And they will implement, the program that the chair and the commission direct. And that was the experience. So,
how did you approach the Dodd Frank rollout?
I think Obama signed it end of July 2010. And, typically in Washington, there's the August recess, and everybody goes out and you take your vacation in August. So I was anticipating that we passed Dodd Frank at the end of July, and it was basically a year-long effort. Everybody was working full speed for a year, and I said, okay, we're going to get finally a break now. Take August and come back in September and really start the engines again and get this thing done. No, even before Obama signed it, he had directed staff to come up with a plan for implementation and set up a team structure. My office, OGC, had the lead in setting up the team structure and which divisions were going to do which rules, who were the team leads, who was the staff, and the agenda for August. I mean, there was no August recess in Gary's mind. Lay out the specific rules that we were going to enact to implement the various provisions. And it was like a 2 to 3 week effort to get the outline of all the rulemakings. And then Gary, we made binders. We made big binders with term sheets. That's another thing I recall, a term sheet for each rule. And this was done in a very short amount of time. Mid to late July to early to mid-August is when we did the rules team structure plus the term sheets. The term sheets were a few pages. They weren't hugely long, but there were a lot of them. And they had to have the major terms. And so Gary put them all in a binder, and there's like 50 or 60 of these rules in this binder. So the binder was pretty thick. And he called up all the heads of all the other financial agencies, the Federal Reserve, SEC, OCC, FDIC, Home Loan Bank Board, the Senators and Loan. He made appointments throughout August, and I think it bleeded into September, to go visit the heads of all those agencies. And he took these binders with him. Usually a few of us with Gary, depending on what the rule was. I went to most all of those meetings with him. And he went to all the heads and said, here's what I'm going to do. Here's how I'm going to implement Dodd Frank. Give me your comments. You just got to put yourself back in the time. That was unheard of for the CFTC to go to the Fed and say, this is what we're doing. Give us your comments. There have been the president's working group where really the Fed and the Treasury sort of be in charge of things. And particularly the CFTC was a low person on that totem pole. The Fed, the Treasury, SEC and CFTC, the PWG. CFTC did not lead that working group, let me put it that way. But Gary comes and says, here's how I'm going to implement Dodd Frank. I want all of your comments and I'll consider it. And so really, he just took the bull by the horns and drove it forward. That's one reason why we were able to get it done. Way back in 2010, he had 2012 in mind. And I just need to give credit to Mary Shapiro at the SEC. And they had a huge agenda to implement Dodd Frank, not just Title VII. Mary committed to Gary that she would commit the resources and the time to swap dealer definition, the joint rulemakings that we had to do, and SEC's commitment, Mary's commitment to do the joint rulemakings, which were predicate to everything else being able to be effective, like what's a swap, that enabled us to go forward too. So the SEC had that rule on top of priority, and that was critical too.
What was the staff's reaction to the effort?
There was a lot of energy. People were motivated. People had not worked like that, missing personal events and missing vacations and spending time away from the family, working nights. People stepped up to the plate, and there was a purpose, and people were motivated. There was a lot of frustration that people didn't get promoted as a result of it. The financial, there's the inability as a federal employee to get like huge bonuses. It's all circumscribed by regulations. Maybe you get some additional time off. It was a fairly high rated organization in terms of the positions, like the grade levels. So there wasn't a whole lot of ability to promote. People did great jobs. They led teams, they did rules, and there's no promotion afterward.
What was it like becoming the commissioner of the CFTC?
There was a period of transition. Being a staff person, I was thrilled about back to the agency is, I had worked with the people at the agency as a colleague, and I was going back to my former colleagues. But there was a difference being a commissioner or a member of the staff. Sometimes I found people who I talked to as a colleague now might be a little more hesitant to talk to me as a commissioner than I might take the information they're giving me and use it some way that their supervisor hadn't acknowledged. It was different in terms of the interpersonal relationships with some of the people there. But having worked there before, I think it was to my advantage, and I think to the agency's advantage, that in government, as in any walk of life, I'm sure you know it, as a journalist, trust, right? I mean, you can't get anything done unless people trust you, particularly in an area where you need to exchange information. I was fortunate that I think I built up a lot of relationships of trust with people in the agency, so I could have a lot of candid discussions and honest discussions. And people could disagree. We could have honest disagreements, see which ways of compromise, and people weren't going to get burned if they give their honest opinion. And if I talk to somebody and I don't talk to their supervisor, I'm not going to burn them by whatever it is. So I think that helped. The other great advantage of going back to the agency was when I first went back. Chris Giancarlo was chair, Russ Benham, Don Stump, myself, and Brian Quintens. And of all those, I knew Don really well. I'd worked for Don for a decade. I'd worked with Russ for about a decade. I worked with Chris for about a decade. Brian, I hadn't worked with before, but we quickly established a relationship. So three of my four colleagues on the commission, I had that same relationship, good, positive relationship. We'd worked together. And I think that enabled the commission that I was on functioned really well. Heath Tarbert replaced Chris after a couple of years, and I hadn't known Heath before, but we quickly established a very good relationship too. So being at the agency previously, building up those relationships with the staff really, I think, helps me in my relationships with my fellow commissioners, and having those relationships of trust and confidence and spirit of working together, I think really is important for any commission. And I think, we functioned well as a commission when I was there.